Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching, and it's the turn of the Tyranid Screamer Killer to be on the painting table today. Now normally at this point I show you a video of the finished model. I'm not doing it at this stage because I do make a few mistakes that I don't really want to talk about at the start of the video, and it will take away from the good parts of the video because there are some bits of this paint scheme that I think I did really well on, and it will change some of how I do painting in the future. So it's always good to experiment. Starting this off though without an experiment, just in the same way we've done the normal Tyranids, black spray and then a desert yellow spray as you saw me turning the model around there. Spraying it from a 45-degree angle from above, so the top is a lot lighter than underneath, and that will help with the shading and things we're doing later. Now I've done the entire base in that brown coloration that I've done all my Tyranid bases in, and we do this before we get to any wash stages, you'll see why later. And then we're moving on to a bone colour that we're painting directly on to the skulls and things that I've stuck on the base. That's just how I've done my basing this time round. And then now we're moving on to dry brushing. So let the base dry because you don't want to catch the dry brush onto the wet paint at the bottom, and then you take most of the paint off your brush here, and we're dry brushing this bone colour across all of the desert yellow to start building some highlight areas that will really help when we move on to the washes and the contrast paints later. You also see I am putting this bone colour onto the base as well, and you see how little of this colour actually comes off from bashing it with quite a big brush because we take most of it off as we go. At some point I will do a video on dry brushing and things. If you're interested in that, sort of a bit more of a deep dive in the technique, just drop a comment down below. After the bone has dried, we're moving on to an off-white colour. Notice this is not pure white, so we're dry brushing the off-white colour here, going slightly less heavy than we did the first coat, and really focusing more on the areas that the light is going to hit kind of from above. And that's that two-tone dry brush, which will really help with the washes and the contrast paint in a minute. Now I've put some rocks on the base, so this is the time now to paint the grey on the rocks we put on the bases. We wouldn't do the grey before we did the dry brushing because then you would hit the grey areas with a sort of whitish dry brush and it just wouldn't look right. Dropping a little bit of gunmetal colour onto the piping that's sticking out there, and then we're ready for the wash stage. So hopefully you see why we did the skulls earlier, because it's fine to dry brush those but not the rocks and the metal. So now we're taking Games Workshop Seraphim Sepia, and we really are putting a good coat right across the entire model, and that will bring down those highlighted areas but also make it a little bit grimdark and grimy, but not too much, because those highlighted areas will lift that kind of colour. Important to note that when I'm doing that, I do the whole model, leave it for a minute or so, and any areas where it might be dripping off, the ends of the talons or anything, just make sure you don't get anywhere that's pooling too much. Now we're moving on to the contrast paint section of this paint scheme, starting off with Basilicanum Grey, and that's the colour I'm going to choose for all the talons on the models, the hooves, and all the kind of spikes and things areas all around there. You will notice this is exactly the same as the previous Tyranid paint schemes I've done, and the first couple of minutes of this video will be just really repeating what's been going on before we start to experiment and do some different things on what is a larger model. And that's kind of what I want to do, something a bit different once we've got over the basic scheme. So now we're working on the Shyish Purple for the armour to represent the Leviathan colour scheme. Now if you were doing your Tyranids in any other colour, you just replace this with whatever your armour colour wants. Now here's the bit that's a little bit different. I wanted to do some really interesting blending up the armour of this Tyranid, because you see on the box art of the Screamer Killer, that's kind of what they've done. But I didn't want to do anything super difficult, super fancy. So what I've taken here is I've taken that Shyish Purple, and I've done a 1-to-1 mix of Shyish Purple and contrast medium in one of the little sockets you see there, and then I've done a mix where it's 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Shyish Purple in the other one, starting off at the base of that section with the 1-to-1 mix, working up maybe a third the way, then putting the 2-to-1 mix in, because I got part way up and thought, no, I want the top to be a much paler. So the third mix you've just seen me do there is 3 parts contrast medium to 1 part. So we've gone 1-to-1, 2-to-1 and 3-to-1 in terms of contrast medium to the actual Shyish Purple, and then working up that arm with, again at the bottom as you can see there, that's the 1-to-1, then in the middle's 2-to-1, then the top's 3-to-1, and you can really see that 3-to-1 is quite watery and just gives you that hint of that purple spreading up into the arm. So I think actually this was a bit of an experimental time. I've done some wet blending with contrast medium paint before, but never really done kind of a blended effect coming out of the one colour. Now I'm taking the bit that is the 3-to-1 mix and putting that in the arm underneath the armour panel, because I felt it looked a little bit too deserty yellowy, and I thought that would make a nice blend. And I'm really pleased with how this arm turns out when it dries, and I will show you that at the end. So this is the part of the video that I went, yes, this has worked, this model's going brilliantly, and it goes wrong in a little bit, and you'll see fairly soon where it goes wrong. This is the first of my mistakes, I think. So I've taken that blend and I took the 2-for-1 blend and put that all across the chest of the carnifex, or screamer killer rather. Now, this isn't the bit that's really bad, and I think, to be honest, I could have got away with that, and it looks okay. I'll make a further mistake in a minute that you'll see. Now moving on to the normal colour schemes that we've done. So this is Volupus Pink, and we're putting this into all the areas where the kind of carapace areas meet fleshy bits, and it's all the kind of hinged, what you would call the elbow. So this is not an elbow, because this is obviously a tyranid creature, and the areas where the kind of talons meet the arms. So that gives it that little bit of vibrancy. Also think about those areas where the legs kind of meeting the torso, putting that in there, and it gives you a nice sort of contrast with the colours used already, whilst they're not too far away on that kind of colour scale, so they are very, very similar. Now here's again where I made another mistake. Over the head here, I've put the 50-50 mix on, so the 1-for-1 contrast medium, and I just thought, oh dear, that looks really bad, and I've probably now doubled down on it by putting another layer on to try and make it a bit more purple, so I hope it would blend in. Now I think in hindsight what I should have done is left it the original desert yellow colour that's had the wash on top, and left it that way. But look, we learn from our mistakes, and I'll show you how I've slightly rescued the situation near the end, because it hasn't turned out as bad as I think it was kind of at this point. So we're pressing on over the normal colour scheme now, because I sort of went back and went, I don't know, like I've done with the head, I'm going to tweak and mess with it, never mind, carry on. And we're now taking a Majos Purple, which is a colour very, very similar to the Volupus Pink we've used already, and just putting that on the weapon areas, if that makes sense. So the bit that runs into the face, and also these splits that are on, you know, the arms and the kind of spines that come out of the back, that look as though that's kind of some sort of spore area or weapon part. And that's what I've done across all my other Tyranids, starting off with my termagant painting scheme and working through. So the scheme is very, very similar, but I wanted to do some different adaptations with the fact it's a bigger, more impressive model. And obviously, you know, I probably should have tested some of these techniques on a smaller model, but you do live and learn, and I think in a second I'll show you how I've rescued it. Now, finishing off the base, this is just taking some Plague Bearer flesh and dropping it in there. Now, all the colour schemes you'll see at the top of the screen there, but there'll be a thing at the end, so you can have a look if you want to know what all the colours I've used are. But obviously, feel free to change and do your own thing. This is hopefully just some little bits of inspiration. So this is what it was looking like, and I was going to drop this on Instagram and thought, I'm still not quite happy with it, but this is what it was looking like before I did some final corrections. Now, it's not horrendous. As much as I've said I don't like what I've done, I don't like how the chest looks, and I don't think the head looks as good as it could. But to sort of fix that, I think it's because it's all gone a bit too dark purple across too much of the model. So I'm just taking a Games Workshop layer paint, a Gene Stealer purple, and again a very, very soft dry brush across all of those purple areas to just give it an extra level of highlighting and bring the colour away from being that really dark purple. Didn't need to do this because obviously the contrast paint is there. I just felt for myself wasn't entirely happy. What I've also done, and completely forgot to film it, was I gave the chest area where it's very, very kind of purpley and dark, I gave that a dry brush going back to the bone white colour very, very gently, just to take it down from the dark blue that it ended up being washed like. So after I'd done that, this is the model. Again, there are bits of this model that I'm really, really pleased with. So the blending up the arm I think is fantastic. I think that's a really quick and easy technique, and I'm looking forward to using that again. Made a couple of mistakes across the head on the colour scheme. I think it's a little bit too purpley for my taste, but I'm still happy with it. I think I rescued it enough that I wouldn't want to sort of not show you guys this. So look, it's always good to learn. If you like that, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again.